There are a lot of real estate investors, like, it's just not a normal per se thing to do. A lot of real estate investors kind of operate by themselves and they don't have a community of people who are like, yeah, this is really cool. Their friends and family are being like, you're weird. Like, this is weird, a weird hobby to have. Well, hello everyone. I'm so excited to be here. I have a presentation, so I'll share it in a second, all about picking your market and building your team, because those are two of the most important aspects of being successful with out-of-state investing. If you have not met me yet, my name is Soli. You might know me on Instagram as Lattes and Leases. Very fun name. I didn't think anyone would follow me back in the day, but I'm glad to have a large community now. I built a $12 million real estate portfolio in 4 years, so it scaled very, very quickly. Combination of like long-term rentals and mid-term rentals. And then 3 weeks ago, I bought a boutique hotel in Palm Springs, which I'm very excited about. It's super fun, but that is the only property I have in California. All of my other 45 plus properties are all out of state, which is what we're really going to talk about today. So in August of 2020, this was like the middle of the pandemic. I bought my first rental property sight unseen, so I didn't see it before I bought it, which felt really scary, kind of like I was shopping from Zillow. But I did have a team and a realtor to kind of walk me through that property. So I ended up buying this cute little single family house in Cincinnati, Ohio. One of the benefits of investing out of state specifically is really being able to unlock any market in the country. As I mentioned before, I honestly never looked on Zillow besides around my neighborhood before I was an investor. And so this is so naive, but I thought that like everywhere had $1 million houses. And I didn't realize that there were some areas in the country with much more affordable real estate. So these are just like 10 different markets that have properties that are less than $200,000, which sometimes it's just like really mind blowing to people that there are markets that are much more affordable and that have so much lower barriers to entry than more expensive markets. So I would say is like one of the biggest benefits of investing out of state. A lot of people think that you need so much money to invest in real estate. So they're telling me, if I want to buy the $1 million house down the street, I need $200,000 to invest. And it's like, well, one of the houses I bought a couple months ago was $67,000. If you're putting, 20% down, it's significantly less than people might think that you need to invest. And that makes it just like 10 times more accessible for the average person to start investing in real estate. These deals, they really do exist. And people always tell me, like, are you sure? Like in this market? Well, these properties I bought just a few months ago, I've never seen them in person. I probably never will see them in person because I have the right team on the ground who's really helping me like execute all of these renovations and leasing out these properties. But these ones were all roughly $100,000 and under. And so there are just much more affordable markets in the country. And those are the ones that I like to really focus on because you're able to find a lot more cash flow in those markets than more expensive markets. So these are the 3 steps. It would be very helpful. You could pull out a pen. You could do this exercise with me. So I think it would be very helpful. Mariah has a pen and a notebook. Very good, good student. Okay, so the first step is to make a list of 3 to 5 markets. And in a second, I will tell you like what kind of is the criteria for making your markets. A lot of people that I see when they're trying to choose their market, they have a list of like 24 different markets. And by the time they start to analyze them, the whole sheet is like black and blue and yellow and green. And it's just crazy because now they're just like so stuck in analysis paralysis. They've looked at 20 different markets and they all look very similar. And that's like a scary place to be. So they end up not moving forward because there's just too many options. There is a point at which too many options is a bad thing. And it's just going to get you stuck because very many markets actually look very similar from an analytics standpoint. And so when you start with less markets, it's actually, I find to be a better way to do it. To be honest, I started with one and I will tell you how that ended up happening, but that's actually how I've seen people be more really successful and like coaching a lot of people. When they have 1 or 2 options, they end up taking action a lot faster. So this is how you should make that initial list of markets. The first thing is it fits your budget. And so if you have roughly, say, $20,000 to invest, you're probably investing in markets where you can find $100,000 properties. That's roughly 20% down. Obviously, there's closing costs and other things, but let's just use that as like a rough order of magnitude. You're probably not investing in Austin, Texas, because that, average price point there is probably more like $600,000 to $700,000. And so when I have a lot of people tell me, like, they'll tell me, I'm choosing between three markets. I'm choosing between Indianapolis, Austin, Texas, and Miami, Florida. And it's like, well, what are your priorities and what is your budget? Well, I want cash flow and I have about $30,000 to invest. And so I tell them, okay, if that's the case, you're probably going to be more so in a more affordable market, which tends to be in the Midwest, or there's a couple markets in the Southeast, in smaller towns in Georgia, or like Chattanooga, Tennessee, that are going to be able to actually fit your price point. The second is that it fits your strategy. And so, especially for people who are going long-term rentals are going to just inherently have less cash flow than something like a short-term rental. So if you're wanting to be cash flow positive in a long-term rental, you're going to probably have to be in more affordable markets to make that work. Everyone talks about like the 1% rule in long-term rentals. It's arguable whether it works these days or not because of interest rates, but I think it's a good kind of rule of thumb. And so if you're thinking, I want to buy $100,000 house, then your rent should be at least $1,000 or 1% of your purchase price. When you get into more expensive markets, and so you're getting into, let's just say, for ease of example, Austin, Texas, $500,000. If you're doing 1% rule, you're not finding houses that a $500,000 house that rents for $5,000. So you can see how that rule kind of breaks down the more expensive that property gets. I like to use a very extreme example. I was renting a house in Santa Clara, California, which is a very expensive zip code in the country. That house, when I moved out, sold for $1.3 million. By the 1% rule, that house should have rented out for $13,000 a month, and I was paying $2,800 per month. And so, like, there is no way that property would cash flow. And so I think that's just a good kind of benchmark. It's not perfect, it's a rule of thumb, but it kind of tells you, like, does the rent keep up with the prices, and does it seem like there could be a potential for positive cash flow? The third thing is probably the most important thing. Well, I guess all of these are very important, but I find that this is the thing that helps people make their list in the first place, is where you have a competitive advantage. So a competitive advantage can show up in a variety of different ways. The first is maybe you know the market well. Some people tell me, like, I've got lots of family in this place. I went to college there and I know the market super, super well. Maybe you know investors in that market. So I know for a lot of people in like my community, they end up choosing Cincinnati because I am their competitive advantage and I give them my contacts. Same as like there are other more experienced investors in my community. And so if they are wondering like what market they should choose, I go, oh, go talk to Jana. She invests in Evansville, Indiana. She can end up introducing you to her team. In my experience, that's a shortcut. If someone else is successful doing what you want to do, say that you want to do midterm rentals, and Mariah here is very successful in Oklahoma City doing midterm rentals, instead of throwing a dart to any one market in the country, it would be so much easier for me to go to her and say, hey, what are you doing that works? What areas, what neighborhoods in the market are really working for you? Where are you still able to find cash flow? What neighborhoods are appreciating faster than other areas of the market? Hey, also, can you introduce me to your agent? Like, that is a much stronger probability of success than you picking a random market on a list that you see on Instagram and going to Google and calling the top realtor that you see, because there's just like no competitive advantage. There's no referral in that situation. So I always find that going through referrals is going to be the easiest way to be successful. The last one is, investor-friendly team members in the market. A lot of people are like, my Aunt Sandy is a realtor. Well, your Aunt Sandy could be a realtor who helps people find their dream homes. And that's not that helpful because she's not investor friendly. And so by having like investor friendly contacts, it's someone who primarily helps investors. We'll talk about this in a little bit when we're talking about building your team. But maybe a contractor or an agent or someone else in the market who can be that kind of person into the market who can explain what's going on. A person is always going to be your strongest competitive advantage and the place where I recommend that you start. So if you're finding your list, you're writing your list right now, think of 3 places where you know someone who is currently successful doing the thing that you want to do, doing the strategy that you want to do. that's going to be a really great place to start instead of just taking top 10 list off of Bigger Pockets sort of thing. A lot of people also tell me that they feel like they have no competitive advantage and they know nobody. That's okay, because that's exactly where I was too. Like, I did not know very many people at all in real estate investing when I first started, but literally nowadays is the easiest time to find people anywhere in the country who are doing things today. So for me, like, I built my community on Instagram and I started strategically networking with people who were investing and being like, what are you doing? And I was also creating content and trying to be valuable where I could, but obviously I was really new. And so that was kind of how I like learned about investing in real estate though. Like, very similarly, I know people who have, gone on Bigger Pockets forums and kind of searched out and said, okay, maybe I can reach out and DM this person and maybe they will be kind enough to like share their connections with me. I will tell you that people are much kinder than you might think that they are, because at some point someone has helped them. And unless they have a ton of followers and can't keep up with stuff, like, most people are kind of willing to kind of pass on knowledge if you're respectful of their time, sort of thing. And so I would encourage you to create your own competitive advantage by just networking, whether that's going to a local RIA, a real estate investing association, something like this, going to a meetup, joining a mastermind, starting an Instagram, something like that, and just be really intentional about reaching out to the people who are actually doing the thing that you want to do. Okay, step 2 is narrow down your market. So you should only have 3, maybe 4, max 5 markets on your list. The lower the better. Now you just want to make sure to check them, because obviously you still want to make sure that you're investing with very good market fundamentals, that your market is growing, and over time your property values are going to increase and not decrease. And so these are the 3 things that I like to look at in a market. The first thing is positive population growth. So you want to know that the population is growing. Just because you want more tenants to lease your properties, the more demand, the higher the rent goes on your properties. And that's like a trend over time. Next is positive job growth. Exact same reason. You want there to be more people looking for your rentals. The third thing is diversified industries. If you invest in any major metro like Indianapolis, Cincinnati, Chattanooga, really any big Raleigh, North Carolina, there's going to be most likely several industries that are supporting that economy. What you want to avoid is investing in, say, like an army-based town or an oil town, where if that one industry went away, all of the demand would just poof be gone. So you don't want to do that. You want to make sure that there's a diverse economy, so that it's able to hold up if for some reason, one of the industries decided to go away. I will tell you that in this specific case, sometimes metrics are helpful, and it's helpful to check the fundamentals of your markets, but at some point it's also helpful to get out of your spreadsheets and start talking to people. Most markets are very big, so they're like this big. And so as you choose your actual neighborhood, it gets down to like this big. And so maybe, this big as a giant area is shrinking, like there's 1% population growth here, but hey, you found a little gem in these 5 neighborhoods that are 5% population growth, and that's kind of where you're going to want to focus on. That's where it's kind of tough. There's always pockets in every market that are better than others. And sometimes when you're looking at crime stats or, population increase or decrease, the numbers without a story can be very confusing. And so it's really helpful to talk to an agent or an investor and be like, this is what my metrics are saying. Can you explain to me why that is? Or if there's certain areas that are, growing for some reason and some areas that are shrinking for some reason. And then really what you want to do after you narrow down your market is narrow down on the neighborhoods that you want to focus on. So this is kind of like the next step, is you want to make sure that the market as a whole is like not declining drastically. And I find that people end up, kind of figuring out what market they want to go with in this step. But in general, a lot of people tell me that they end up getting stuck between a couple different markets. And when you look at, for example, I invest in Cincinnati a lot. And so I have friends that invest in Indianapolis, but if you put those 2 markets next to each other, they look very, very similar as a market in terms of population size, population growth, crime rates, this and that. And so a lot of people get down to 2, sometimes even 3 markets, and they're like, now what? Now I'm stuck. Now I don't know what to invest in because now they just all look very similar. And so really the last step here is using your competitive advantage to choose the market that you're going to go with. So really the last question you have to ask is, where do I have the strongest relationships? Because your strongest relationships are going to be the key to success. And so maybe in Cincinnati, you have really strong relationships, and in Indianapolis, you don't really know anybody. Okay, well, then I would choose Cincinnati, all other things equal. How I actually really found my competitive advantage was through a guy I met named Mark. And so as I mentioned before, I was a commercial real estate broker. And for my job, I traveled all around the country. And one of the places that I went was in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I was there for maybe like, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 days. And I was actually very surprised. I didn't honestly think I would really like the Midwest that much. Not that I wouldn't like it, I just didn't have like super high expectations for it. And as I was driving around, I was like, oh my gosh, there's like new construction literally everywhere. Like, why are there new office buildings popping up? The food is so amazing everywhere you look. Everyone has a labradoodle and is walking them on the street. Like, there's Pilates and yoga studios every single corner. The coffee shops are very cute. It kind of looked like San Francisco coffee shops. And so I began to get like very impressed by like the Cincinnati market. Granted, at this time, I had no interest in investing in real estate, to be honest. I just thought it was a fun observation. While I was on that trip, somebody I met who was our local contact in Cincinnati mentioned in passing that he owned like 7 or 8 rental properties. And I was like, that's cool. And then I just continued on my way. And so I honestly did not think anything of it. This was maybe 6 months before the pandemic, before anything, and I was loving my job, sort of thing. And so when the pandemic hit and I was like, all right, it's now time to get serious and try to make some money, gotta pick my market. I honestly at the time was like considering, do I invest in the Bay Area? But the most I could afford was like a 1 bedroom condo. And I was like, I don't think that that's going to make that good of an investment. And so I was racking my head, like, where do I maybe know anybody? And I was like, you know what? I remember Mark that one time mentioned that he had 7 or 8 rental properties, and maybe Mark would be nice enough to like talk to me. So I called him up after like not talking to him for a long time. And I said, like, hey, like, would you be willing to walk me through on Zoom, different parts of the market, sort of thing? I'm very interested in buying my first rental property. And so he did. Like, we jumped on a 1 hour Zoom call. He said, like, invest here, not here. The east side is better. Here are the neighborhoods you want to focus on. And it was like the best education that I could have had at the time, having someone just walk me through. And he was very happy to do it. He connected me with his realtor, and yeah, it was like within 12 weeks, I closed on my first property. It happened really fast. Before I closed on it, he actually even walked through my property. Not everybody will be that nice, but at the time, like, I think he was just so excited that like somebody was interested in what he was doing. There are a lot of real estate investors, like, it's just not a normal per se thing to do. A lot of real estate investors kind of operate by themselves, and they don't have a community of people who are like, yeah, this is really cool. Their friends and family are being like, you're weird. Like, this is weird, a weird hobby to have. And so I think when I was really interested in talking to him, he was like, yeah, like, I would love to talk about real estate. Like, I'll walk your house for you. Like, that sounds really fun. And so he walked my house for me. And I don't think I would have bought that property if it weren't for him, because my realtor was like, I don't know if I would buy this property. And he walked through and he's like, buy this property. And I'm glad I did, because I bought this house for $98,000 4 years ago. I put in like $15,000, and today it's worth almost $200,000. That property has nearly doubled in value in the last 4 years. I've made somewhere between 500 and 800 bucks of cash flow a month off of this property. And like, that's kind of what ended up starting it all for me, was like him showing me how to do it. And like, it just blew my mind. 3 months later, I bought a house. So that's like the power of having a friend, a buddy, a competitive advantage in a market. At the time, I think I was very naive on what it meant to analyze a market. I was like, well, what? I just thought, I'm like, okay, my friend Mark is being successful in long-term rentals, and so I want to do the exact same thing. I didn't look at any other market, to be honest. I just knew that he was being successful and he could introduce me to my team. And that was like enough for me. Nowadays, I don't advise people to do it the exact same way. Like, I think you should look into some of the market fundamentals, but ultimately it all goes down to where you know your people, and that's the markets I choose to invest in. So Charmaine asked, how many markets am I in? I'm in 3. And every single story, and I'll tell you the story why, because I think it's very relevant to this. And so a year I bought, 30 something units in Cincinnati. And then I met this person a couple years ago before that at a mastermind, who lived in Augusta, Georgia, and owned a construction company and owned a property management company. And so as I was renovating properties in Cincinnati, I was like, okay, well, I don't love managing renovations. And so if I can have a partner who manages the construction and like can take that whole part of it, I think that would be a big value add. Plus, Augusta, Georgia as a market is very affordable. It's great for cash flow. It's very easy to flip markets. Relatively easy to flip houses in that market. And so I decided to expand into that market as well. Why? Because the pricing worked out for the strategies I wanted to do, it worked. And then ultimately, I had the right team member there. Why I invested in Palm Springs is because I went to a conference and I met somebody who owned a boutique hotel in Palm Springs. And I was like, oh my gosh, I want to buy a hotel in Palm Springs. And so she introduced me to her broker, and her broker was a rock star. And so I said, why am I going to look at another market when I've got a rock star team right in front of me? And I have a friend who's willing to kind of walk me through the process. So every single step along the way, it's always been through relationships. And I think that is the easiest way to pick your market and to not get kind of stuck in this analysis paralysis mode. The key thing to picking a market is just choosing one market and stick to it. Like, honestly, because otherwise, I think the number one mistake that I see people making when they're picking a market is just like getting so much shiny object syndrome. And like, I think this meme summarizes it perfectly. Like, you chose a market, you get distracted, you choose another market, and you're just like not committed to either choosing a strategy or choosing a market. And you're just like constantly switching it up. And the result is that you just kind of get stuck. So you've kind of set your goals. You picked, I want to do long-term rentals, midterm rentals, whatever you choose. But you kind of get stuck at that like market phase. And that means that you can't build your team. You're never kind of progressing. You're never going to put an offer in. And people wonder, like, why haven't I bought a house? It's been 2 years. No joke. People get stuck for like 2 or 3 years on this step. And so at some point, it's like making a decision. An imperfect decision is better than not making a decision, because there is a big opportunity cost to not making a decision. People tell me all the time, like, I've spent 3 years on this one question. And I'm like, do you want to know what I did in 3 years? Like, not to be mean, but like, you could have been so much further if you just made the decision. And then even if you made a mistake, you would learn so much faster just by doing the thing. So hopefully that helps people with that mindset shift. So in terms of summarizing action items, make a list of 3 to 5 markets, use your competitive advantage. If you don't have one, go make a competitive advantage, go network with somebody today. Use market metrics to narrow down to one market. A lot of people ask me, like, what like tools do you use to research markets? If you want to find population growth, you can just Google it, and like the Census Bureau has stuff that pops up, and they're as accurate as they can be. And then finally, just write down one market. I tell people to like put it on a sticky note and put it on their desk, on their side table, on their mirror, and then just put like, do not change this on the bottom of it, because it's so tempting to just like look all over the place. But looking all over the place is just a distraction. It's not going to allow you to really gain enough momentum to really be successful.